kind of weird right there. Push that out a little far. There we go. I don't normally do it like this. What does it look like? Actually, looks kind of good. Yeah, that looks kind of cool. Just didn't look good with the board behind me. Let's see. How's it going, man? Hello, hello.
Hey, peace, brother.
What's up, man? How are you?
Good. Let's see. If I can make it, let's just see my. Let's see.
Very cool.
Cool. You still got light where you? What state you in?
I'm in California.
Oh, yeah, in Cali.
It's 6 o'clock out here, so.
Nice. All right, cool.
Yep. You can hear me okay, though?
Yeah, I can hear you pretty good, yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, last time we were having audio difficulties, so.
Okay.
Very good. So I'll kick off the intro, and we'll get it started.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. Let's see. Make sure it's recording. This is the Todd Capital Millionaire podcast. This is episode number 62. My name is Charles Oglesby, also known as Todd Millionaire. I'm the founder and the director of the Todd Capital Investment Club. We have over 210 members, adding more each day. Also the founder of Todd Acquisitions. On to deal number 4. Great things are happening with both of our clubs, both real estate and stocks. Thank you all for tuning in. The purpose of this show is to share the stories of successful African-American investors and business owners so that people can hear the stories of successful examples and learn that business and investing are the true keys to financial success and generational wealth. Today, we have a special guest. He is most known for the recent book that he just published. I don't want to ruin the name, but I know it's based on the new Jay-Z album that everybody's been talking about. It kind of shifted the culture, I think. He is a personal finance expert. He's also a speaker, a television and radio personality. He's a best-selling author, a business consultant, brand ambassador, and life coach to entrepreneurs, celebrities, athletes, and executives. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ash Cash.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here, man, and to talk to you and your audience. Appreciate you.
Cool. So can you kind of tell us where you got started on your personal finance journey?
Man, so I'm from New York. born and raised in Harlem in the projects. And, right around the time where I graduated high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I was working at a video store, fast out the Blockbuster videos. Somebody, one of the assistant managers actually came in and said, hey, they're hiring for tellers at Chase Bank. For me, I kind of knew, like there wasn't really much place I can go within the video store. So I was like, man, I should apply, to be a teller at the bank. And so I did apply, got the job. I was 19 years old. I fell in love, man, immediately fell in love. I've always been an entrepreneur. I was, 8 years old packing bags at the local supermarket, 15 years old on 125th Street selling CDs and mixtapes. So I always had sort of like this entrepreneur bug in me and always, someone who was looking to advance. And so when I got into the banking world, I saw there was so many different directions that I could go. So I immediately fell in love. I immediately, started to do what I needed to do to advance. And I've done everything in banking. And so, fast forward, I had a 15-year career in banking, did everything in banking from teller to personal banker, private banker, where I manage high net worth individuals. I was a branch manager, also a CEO of a credit union. And that was sort of like my last position before I, kind of jumped into, entrepreneurship full time. But yeah, did everything in banking and just realized that I had a, sort of different trajectory for my life. And so I decided to, start writing books and, travel the country to speak and teach on financial education.
Very cool. And so I think that, I've worked in banking, and what I realized is it's really cool to see what wealthy people do or see how people manage their finance. That's one of the things that I think I took from banking. Could you kind of have a similar experience, or how did banking kind of influence your career?
Oh, no, absolutely. It's funny that you say that because a lot of times, and I always teach about money paradigms, right? A lot of times your money mentality is based on how you're brought up. And so sometimes you may think money works a certain way, or a certain person or certain people, have a certain lifestyle based on what you think. But being in banking, it kind of dispelled a lot of the myths that I thought. I had people who would come in and, they have minks on and have, the flyest clothes. And I'm like, yeah, this person, they got it. And then you look at their bank account and they don't have it, right? They're in overdraft all the time. They're always, begging for a refund, right? And then on the opposite spectrum, you have people that walk in the bank, like dingy shirt, jeans have holes in it or whatever. And, from the visual, you'd be like, oh, yeah, this person isn't important. Then they sit with you and you're like, yo, you got $2 million just sitting in a checking account. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that it made me realize that money isn't a look. Money doesn't look like anything, right? Because it's not to say that the guy or the girl who has the mink doesn't have money, because I've seen that too, right? I've seen the people who have a lot of money who like to dress nice, but I also see, someone who dress nice that has no money. I've seen the person who doesn't like to dress nice but have, a lot of money, and the person who doesn't like to dress nice because they can't afford it. And so, the point of what I learned about money was that it's not really about how you look, because everybody has a different money personality, and their money personality allows them to spend money differently. And so, it was really about what were the people doing with their money. And so, it was another thing that I learned, in my days as a banker, was that when I looked at the people that did have the 2 million, or the people who were wealthy, they, majority of them they didn't earn their income through working, right? They earned their income through ownership of something, whether they own the business, whether they own, stock, whether they were a landlord and owned the building and was receiving income. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, I worked this hard and I got $2 million. It was always, a derivative of, them actually owning something. And that's one of the biggest things I learned.
Yeah. And in actuality, that's kind of, I mean, a lot of what you said there is the crux of this show. I'm really big on preaching having money, not necessarily looking like money. Another thing that I'm really big on is ownership, of course, because I mean, in all actuality, I've said this before, it's like there's certain levels of income that you can never get to unless you own something. Like you might think that you can get there, but like unless you have a business, unless you own some real estate, unless you own something of substance, it's really tough to achieve true wealth in America. You can be okay, you can be comfortable, but like ignorant wealth, it's tough to get there without ownership. Absolutely. And so, I mean, that was one of the cool things that I learned in banking is seeing how they make their money, seeing how they structure their money, seeing how they work with their money with family members. That was really cool stuff. So I think that my banking experience definitely helped shift my money mentality. And it's interesting to see that it kind of impacted yours. So where did you go after banking? What did that look like for you?
Yep. So after banking, I mean, you know, just to take it a step back, during the time I was working as a banker, I started to volunteer at local schools, inner city schools, teaching about money and teaching, you know, financial education. And then I started to actually love that. You know, I started to love, you know, standing in front of a classroom teaching about money. And so the more and more I did it, the more I realized like, wow, this is something that, you know, especially when I got there, I realized when I was going to the schools, there were so many people that didn't know the information. And oddly enough, it wasn't only the kids, right? You know, I had teachers who were like, wow, I never knew that. Or parents want me to come in and have conversations about money with them. And so I said, there are so many people out there that need a financial education because it's not taught in college. It's not taught in high school. And so a lot of the financial education, how to manage money, we figure it out when we get into the working world via trial and error. And so after, you know, I left the banking world, you know, I jumped into teaching about financial education. And so, you know, I started working with nonprofit organizations and teaching, you know, kids still about financial education. But then, you know, when I started to, you know, surround myself with other people who were doing the work, I realized that you could actually make a living from it. And so I decided to write my first book. And so I wrote my first book in 2009. And my first book was called Mind Right, Money Right, 10 Laws of Financial Freedom. And, you know, it did very well. One of the reasons it did well was because it was really the first time, or not, maybe not the first time, but I tried to write the book in a way where it was speaking to, you know, sort of like the urban experience. Pop culture and finance. And so, you know, I used I used different stories of folks like Oprah and, you know, Jay-Z and Barack Obama and Magic Johnson, and kind of used their stories to teach personal finance topics. And so that was sort of like the entryway for me into the space of being a personal finance expert. And I've been doing that ever since. And so that's what, that's what I've been doing. You know, I'm 6 books in now. And so, I've written 6 books. You know, I travel the country, you know, constantly booked at colleges and conferences, you know, teaching about financial education. You know, I am, you know, a regular on, you know, television and radio, you know, giving advice on how to manage money. And so that's where, I took my career, you know, right after, leaving the banking world.
Nice. And so I was listening to one of your interviews, and you mentioned that you have a PhD.
Yes.
A public housing degree.
Yes.
And I think that as a culture, we tend to kind of sometimes see limited circumstances, or see like humble beginnings as a death sentence. But I think that there's a lot of lessons in where you come from. And I think that that's kind of what you were getting at with the PhD. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, you're 1,000% correct. I think that for some reason, a lot of times people look at their circumstance, like you mentioned, as like a death sentence. Like if I didn't grow up in a family that had this certain structure, then my life is destined to be a certain way. And so for me, my PhD, right, my public housing degree is something that I'm really proud of because when you think about the statistics, right, when you think about, I grew up in a single parent home, and so my, single mom, three kids, and so black man in a city, I was being told that I'll be dead or in jail by 25, right? That was the narrative that they had for me, and to be able to not only survive but really thrive, right? I was a VP at one of the largest financial institutions at 24 years old, and so 5 years after getting into the banking space, I was one of the youngest doing that work. I managed a $8 million project for I turned 30 years old. I was 28 years old when I was doing that. When I became the CEO of a credit union, I was 31 years old. And so when I think about the level of success I was able to have, it's important that people who are from and not only from the projects, not from the city, just anybody who has any type of circumstance, any type of obstacles that may have gotten their way. I use that as a story or a testament to show that you can do anything you put your mind to. Once you just change your mindset, period, right? Once you just change your mindset, you start to go in the direction of your dreams, you can change your circumstance at any time. I love to use the example of a GPS system, right? If anybody's, everyone should be familiar with a GPS. You get in your car, you put in the direction of where you want to go, and then the GPS is going to take you to that destination. If you take a wrong turn somewhere, right, the GPS is not going to take you back to where you started in order to get you to your destination. It actually just recalibrates where you are and then takes you to that destination. And so, I'm using that metaphor to say, I don't care where you started. I don't care what happened. I don't care, what obstacles you had stand in your way, whatever it is, the moment you decide to put the destination in and say, this is where I want to go, your GPS, right? You are going to have the directions. If you believe that you can achieve it, you will have the directions to get to your goal. And so we have to remember that. And that's what, my PhD has done for me is it's used as an example to those who may have excuses to say, hey, you know what? Well, I grew up this way, so I can't do this. But again, I could tell you as somebody who grew up, with a public housing degree and was taught, how to survive, right? And so, learning how to survive in the projects and, coming out, I just learned so much, and that's what I use, to propel myself in business.
Nice. It's a lot of people that listen to this show, family members, people who have had like a unique past. I think that hearing something like that is huge because a lot of people can think like, oh, I didn't get my degree at 22, or, oh, I might have had this happen when I was 18 that sent me back to I was 27. And now I have something on my record and I feel as though I can't do anything. And I think that I've never even heard anybody use that way. Like you just recalibrate from where you are. Like it doesn't say, oh, well, you have to have had this happen before. It's like, okay, well, this is what happened. So maybe you got to work 2 jobs at the same time. Maybe you have to work a job and run a business. Maybe you have to just go all in on your business. Maybe you can't get sneakers because you got to buy inventory. So it's really just about adjusting what you have to do and then doing those things you have to do. Like it's really it's that simple. I was going to ask you, man, there's a question that, because you had such success at an early age, how were you able to do it? What were you doing? Because I think that's important for people to know too.
I think that success is a mindset, right? And so there are a lot of reprogramming that needs to happen. And so for me, it was one, surrounding myself around people that were successful, because growing up, you know, in the inner city, I didn't really have too many people that I could kind of go to and ask for mentorship. And so mentorship was a big part of my success because, you know, with someone who, you know, has had success before, they know the formula. They understand what it takes to be successful. And so, you know, surrounding myself around people who had success, who were able to kind of guide me in the direction and allow me to, you know, help me along the way was one way. You know, second thing, I had to reprogram myself. So it was around, you know, it was about reading, you know, constantly feeding my mind with positive, you know, thoughts and you know, information that was going to help me, you know, develop myself from a personal perspective. And so I read, you know, so many, you know, personal development books, audios that really help, you know, change my you know, my thought process on life. And then honestly, it was just hard work, man. I think that people, you know, they see the success, they see the highlight reel, right? They see the end result, but they don't, you know, they don't see that I wake up 4 o'clock in the morning every day. They don't see all the times that I was told no, right? That constantly banging on doors and people saying no, 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 and you just keep going, keep going, keep going. People don't see, you know, the things that just happen throughout your journey, that all are part of the journey, right? And so all of the no's that I've gotten, all of the setbacks, all of the things that you know, weren't favorable, you know, now in hindsight, I know that they were all, you know, working for my greater good. They were all part of the process. It was all part of what was helping me get to that, you know, get to that next level. And so, you know, there's a lot of sacrifice, you know, and so, you know, having success at an early age, you know, think about it. I wasn't able, you know, I was in my early 20s where all my friends were going to the club every weekend. I wasn't doing that, right? I was home studying. I was home, plotting on my next move, sacrifice. But you know, they say, do what you have to do now, so later you could do what you want to do. And so, you know, I can confidently say, you know, now still in my mid 30s, I work from home. You know, I have time freedom. I have, you know, financial freedom. You know, I have 2 kids. I'm married. I'm able to, you know, I don't miss, you know, my daughter's basketball games. I'm able to be in my son's life. And so there's a lot of things I could do now because I put in the work, you know, at an earlier time, and sacrificed a little bit at an earlier time, to put certain things in place. So that way, you know, I could, you know, live a comfortable life and thrive.
Yeah. And so I think then, I mean, going from there, it'd be interesting to kind of know what you did in order to position yourself so that you could work for yourself, because a lot of people are trying to figure out when to make the jump, and they need to make sure that they've done all the things that allow them to make the jump. So what did you do that allowed you to do it? And it could be anything. It could be just maybe you just started doing enough business and hustling outside of work that then you could afford to do it, or maybe you were just saving and investing, or how did you make that jump?
Yep, no, that's a great question. And so, you know, for me, there was a couple of double dutch, you know, like double dutching between entrepreneurship, right? Like when you going back and forth. You know, the first time I quit my job, I kind of, you know, jumped out, right? Jumped out the window, no parachute, nothing, you know, and I hit the ground, right? I didn't, you know, I hit smack down on the ground. Actually almost went through foreclosure. You know, there was so much that I almost lost the first time I decided to jump out and become an entrepreneur, because, you know, again, I didn't have, you know, anybody to tell me otherwise. I didn't have any role models. And so it was like sort of like trial and error for me. And so, you know, I decided I was like, I gotta go back to work. And so I went back to work. Was still, you know, sort of like, you know, side hustling and at work. And so, you know, but this time around, the first time I had some savings, but not enough to maintain my lifestyle. And so the second time around, I said, you know what, the reason why I fell flat on my face was because as I was building this business, I was too reliant on my physical labor. So in order for me to make money, I had to actually work. And so the second time around, I said, as I make money, I'm actually not going to live this extravagant lifestyle. I'm gonna fall back a little bit, right? I'm gonna, cut back on my expenses so that way I can start saving more money. And as I started to save, I was able to acquire real estate, right? I was able to acquire property. And so as a landlord, I was able to, rent out property that gave me, income that I didn't physically have to work for. And so as I continued to, work a 9-to-5 and work my business started to take off. But this time when when it was time for me to, leave my 9-to-5, I was more comfortable doing it because I I had property that was, giving me income. And so, that's what, sort of allowed me to take the first step. But then beyond that, it was also not getting comfortable, right? It was me, acting like a squirrel, right? And so when you think about a squirrel that, during the season of abundance, they're eating enough that they need to eat, but they're also grabbing all the acorns they could grab and they're stuffing them away because they know that there may be a season that and so for me, it was acting like the squirrel. I knew from my past experience that, I knew what it felt like to almost lose my house and not know how to feed my family and things of that nature. And so, the second time around, I was like, nope, I'm going to keep stacking and make sure, I keep building, other, business ventures and other things that could create, more income for me. And that's what I did. And that's what I continue to do, is really just figure out other ways that I can create residual income. And so, even, as an author, right, I've written 6 books for a reason, because when you think about, books, that's a great way to do something one time, right? My first book came out in 2009. And then when I released this new book, The Wake Up Call, Financial Lessons Learned from 444, right? When I released that book, a lot of new people were introduced to me because that book sort of took on a life of its own. And so now thousands more people were introduced to me, and now they start to buy my other books, What the FICO, Mind Right, Money Right, Mind Right, Life Right, Taylor's Way, all of the other books that I've written. And so that's been part of the strategy as well, is creating, intellectual property that, I create one time, but I could continue to sell over and over again.
Yeah, that's dope. There's a ton in there. I was just taking notes, trying to make sure I can grasp as much as I can so I can circle back because, man, I didn't know you were going to talk about real estate. This show is mostly about like real estate. And so It's cool that you're a real estate guy as well. Like I know you're a big personal finance. I know you've done a ton of interviews. I didn't know you're a real estate guy. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But also, just the concept of acting like a squirrel. And I think that so many people can get caught up during the times of abundance of living abundantly. And so it's like I always tell my parents, like, hey, like it's good now, but don't live like it's good. Live like it's not good. Right. So that then when things aren't good, you're loading up. You're buying from people who were living like it was great. And so I think that was huge. It's something I've said, but I never phrased it as a squirrel, which is really dope. I want to talk about your real estate ventures. How did you learn about real estate? What motivated you to kind of get involved in real estate? And then what did your first deal look like?
Yep. For me, it was sort of like by mistake, honestly. I wind up, so my wife and I, we have a 2-family house in New York, a multifamily. And so right around the time when I mentioned earlier, leaving corporate America and almost going through foreclosure, right around that time, my mother-in-law was living with us. And so she occupied the other apartment. And so, we thought we were going to lose the house. And so, everyone started packing things up and we were ready to leave. And, my mother-in-law moved out. We moved from the upstairs apartment downstairs. And we kind of like, downgraded everything because we knew at any time now, either the bank was going, come and get the house or someone was going to buy it because we put it up as a short sale. And then, fast shout to President Obama. He came out with the Making Home Affordable program, where if people had homes that were underwater, that they could refinance those homes. And refinance them at the rate where, get forgiving for the amount that was underwater. And so we did that. And so we refinanced the home. We were able to, I think it was $200,000. The worth was $200,000 left, so less. So we were forgiven for $200,000, and then the loan was refinanced. I decided to go back to work, and then so as I went back to work, the money that I was making, because I was a banker, had a great resume, I was able to come back into the banking world, making six figures, making good money. And so I was able to afford the mortgage, but now the mortgage was way affordable because it's it's a cheaper loan. And so now I have an empty apartment because my mother-in-law decided to move. And so I'm like, oh, what am I going to do with this empty apartment? So we put it on on the market. We found a good tenant, and when we realized that the tenant was paying us what the same amount that our mortgage was, and so we technically now I'm making more money, and I have no mortgage, right? I'm not paying a mortgage because my tenant is paying a mortgage. I said, it was like a light bulb moment, right? One of the worst times in my life, right? Going through all of these, trials and tribulations of almost losing it all actually became a blessing, right? It actually became a blessing because it taught me the value of, using real estate as a way to get residual income. And so from there, my wife and I just decided to look for other, 2-family homes that were, that could actually give us a good rent roll, right? And so, we weren't necessarily looking for, places that we would live. We were looking for places that had a great rental market. And so, the good thing about places that have a good rental market is that usually the property is affordable. And so we were able to, take advantage of that and add some other, properties in our portfolio. And so, it allows us to, be entrepreneurs. My wife, works, actively in the business with me as well. But then she also has an HR consulting business that she has. And, it allows us to really be active parents, in our children's life, but then still live.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right. It kind of like every now and then it lags a little bit. And so
Okay.
I'm just like waiting for it to push through. So the editor will catch all that stuff. But I think it's dope. I mean, again, it's a lot of gems, a lot of content just in that statement. But I think what's really cool is through real estate and through ownership, you're able to create a business that changes people's lives. And so that's one thing I always tell people is like ownership benefits everybody. Your job benefits you. So it's like you're writing books, you're doing shows, you're spreading the word, and you're kind of filling that gap of financial literacy that most people aren't getting. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that financial literacy has been such a struggle? And I mean, how can we help bridge that gap?
I think, we have to go back and realize that the people who created the systems, right, the economic systems, the business systems, these are the people who are, they control everything. And so because the people who create the systems and the businesses control everything, their main goal is to prepare people to work, right? And so, when you think about, let's say, the 1%, and I talk about this stat all the time, and people throw it around as if it's just, oh, the 1%, but it's a real thing, right? When you look at the 400 families in the United States, they have more wealth than the entire Black population and 1/3 of the Latino population combined. Meaning that if you take every single Black person in America and take 1/3 of the Latino population and you put them together, 400 families have more wealth than that whole entire population, right?
Wow.
And so who started colleges, who are in charge of these Fortune 500 companies is these wealthy 400 families. And so what happens is when it's, when they created the university system wasn't about creating business owners. It was about creating people to work in those businesses, right? And so that's why personal finance isn't taught in high school. That's why personal finance isn't taught in college or in a university, is because universities are training you to manage someone else's business, not manage your own business, not learn how to be an entrepreneur. Even entrepreneurship as a discipline in college is a new thing. It's not something, that has always been around. It's something that's new. But even if you go to business school, right, people, pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to the top business schools and get MBAs, but they're not teaching you to run your own business. They're teaching you how to, be an executive within a Fortune 500 company. And so I believe that's why, it's done that way. Even when you think about just the economy, period, right? Whenever there's something wrong with the economy, or there's a recession, the first thing, they don't tell you to save your money. They don't tell you to invest your money. They tell you to buy, right? Because even the word recession, right? Like, what is the meaning of a recession? Recession doesn't mean that the country doesn't have any money. It just means that for 2 consecutive quarters, the GDP did not rise, right? And the GDP is based on based on consumption, right? And so when the media puts us in a frenzy and says, oh, it's a recession, they're making us believe that no one's making money. No, it's not that. It's that people aren't buying enough. And so whenever there's a recession, whenever there's, something going wrong with the economy, the first thing they do, I remember back in the day, they would give us, these stimulus packages, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't tell us to save the stimulus packages. They told us, go out and buy some stuff, because they want to stimulate the economy. And so I think that's what it is. I think that, saving and investing and becoming an owner is not conducive to how the U.S. Economic system is built. And so that's why there hasn't been a big push for it. And I think that people are starting to wake up. People are starting to ask themselves, well, why do, just a certain portion of the country gets to live the life of their dreams? Why I can't live the life of my dreams? And I think a lot of, we started to see this with, millennials, right? The earlier generation are like, oh, you know what? We're going to work 30 years and we're going to retire later. And then we're going to live our lives. And then you got young people saying, that don't sound right to me. I want to live my life right now. And then you have, this big movement of people saying, you know what? I want to have my cake and eat it. Right? Why have my cake and be able to look at it and, later on? I want to eat it right now. And so people are starting to get that awakening, that wake-up call is happening. And so now that's why we see, people, starting to take their lives into their own hand. And plus, you look at, the internet that allows us to get information faster. And so we don't have to necessarily accept what our local news is telling us. We don't have to accept what our teachers are telling us. We have real life examples of people, across different coasts that we can look at, we can feel, we can say, oh, this is what they're doing. And so, and people are sharing their stories. We have real access to wealthy people who may have not gone to school, that may have just, grinded it out and created their wealth. And so people now have choices. People now can say, you know what, this school thing might not be for me. Maybe I'm going to go a different route. And I think that's why it isn't taught, but that's why we're starting to see, sort of like a surgence of, a movement of financial empowerment happening.
Yeah. One of the things that you said, and I think this kind of goes hand in hand with maybe having your cake and eating it too. And it's something you said that you've achieved, and it's something that even like I didn't even know it existed. And that's just this idea of being financially independent. And I've been kind of following it through the Bigger Pockets Money podcast, and they talk about how there's these people who, what they did is they focused on paying off their house, and they focused on paying off their car, and they focused on saving up enough money to just live off of their investments. And I think that a lot of people, what they're doing is, it's kind of like Mr. Money Mustache says, it's like you live a life around your debt. So it's like you'll make the minimum payment, you'll just drag it out for 30 years. You drag out your student loans for 10, 15 years instead of hustling, chunking it out in 2-3 years and then chilling. How were you able to achieve financial freedom, and how would you kind of what tips would you give African American people who are looking to do the same? Because I don't think it's something we're talking about yet.
Yep. I think a couple of things is important. Is that a lot of times people are living above their means, right? And people are so based on what they're making, they're acting their wage. And so I have back in the day they used to say act your age, not your shoe size. And so I would say act your wage, not your want size. And so there's a lot of things that we may want in life, but those things are going to cost us. And so if you are, for example, if you are living a lifestyle that's a $30,000 lifestyle, when you start making $50,000 or when you start making $60,000, do not upgrade your lifestyle to follow suit, right? If you're driving a Toyota at $30,000, don't drive a Mercedes at 60, right? Drive a Toyota at 60, right? Drive a Toyota at 80,000, at 100,000, because, especially us as African Americans, we're so used to not having that when we do start making any money, we start focusing on things, right? We start buying things. We start buying depreciating assets. And so, even when you look at our consumption numbers as a country, I believe the current numbers are $1.2 trillion is what African Americans spend on an annual basis. And so it's not that we don't have the money, right? Because if we were our own country, we would be the 9th richest country in the world, right?
Yep.
And so it's not that we don't have the money; it's what we're doing with that money. And so
Yep.
I would say that the first thing that you must do at any level, right, at $30,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, $1 million a year, you need to change your relationship with money. Instead of working for money, you need to have money work for you. Period. And so as you're earning money, it's not about finding ways to spend the money, because it's about finding ways to grow the money. And I think that's how you create financial independence. That's how you create financial freedom, is by changing that relationship. Instead of us working hard for money, we need to make money our employer. Money works for us. And when we do that, when we start to use our income, right? Because if you're not, if you didn't, I wasn't born in a family that gave me an inheritance. And so I had to work hard for money. And so it's important that as African Americans, we start active, right? So we start with active income, where we're working hard, we're grinding out, we're sacrificing, we're doing everything that we can do to accumulate money. But once we accumulate that money, let's not let all of that hard work go in vain and start buying depreciating assets. Let's start to focus on purchasing things that are going to increase, right? Appreciating assets, or invest in things like your own business. Or if you're not the entrepreneur type, right? Because entrepreneurship is not for everybody. If you're not the entrepreneur type, maybe invest in somebody else's business, become a silent partner in someone else's business. But find ways, to create that financial freedom, and that's going to include, pulling back some. For me, when I, went through that issue of, foreclosure and that circumstance I went through, once I got back on my feet, it wasn't about I'm a ball out now, right? It was about, all right, I'm gonna, since I know how to live modestly, I'm going to continue to live modestly. And even to this day, I still, live modestly. Like I don't, I don't, buy all, crazy things. Most things I buy on discount. I don't, I got a Ford, I got a Ford Explorer, right? Like, I'm not trying to ball out. And that's not to say, anybody who wants to, buy the things that, buy expensive things, that there's something wrong with it. But for me, just going through a circumstance and understanding how it is to not have, I want to make sure that I always have, especially because I have children, especially because, I want to be able, to pass off assets to them. And so I'm very mindful of, my consumption, and I'm making sure that as, the things I'm consuming are going to be able to increase my net worth.
Nice. Cool. So we've talked about that. I want to talk about the brand of Ash Cash.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with the name? And I mean, how are you going about building up that brand?
Yep. And so the name Ash Cash is actually a name that I've had, all my life as a teenager growing up. Right around, I want to say right around where like Cash Money, came out. My real name is Ash Exantis. And so right around the time that Cash Money came out, my friends used to call me Ash Money. And then one day, somebody was, was like forgot the nickname. It was like, yo, Ash Money, Ash Cash. And then I was like, oh, like Ash Cash had a nice little ring to it. And so it was sort of like a nickname that I used. And a funny tidbit was the reason why I started to build the brand of Ash Cash was because I started to write my book in 2008 while I was still at JP Morgan Chase. And so part of the rules, it's a conflict of interest to write a personal finance book while you work for a financial institution because you have to get permission, right? Because the financial institution doesn't want to blur the lines and they don't to be held liable for any advice that you give while you're an employee of the bank. And so, I wasn't going to let, that stop me, right? Ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So instead of writing, as Ash Exantis, I published my first book as Ash Cash. I was like, hey, people in the hood know me as Ash Cash anyway. Let me just use that moniker to write my first book. And then it just worked for me. As I started to go around, my primary target audience was high school kids and college kids anyway. And so Ash Cash was a cool name. And so I began to build the brand that way. And so, to your question on how do I build the brand, at this stage of my life, it's about being my authentic self. And so it's about, I am a hip hop connoisseur. I love hip hop. It's a culture, but it's also a $1 billion business. And so for me, I've learned how to infuse some of the lessons I've learned in hip hop into personal finance. And so I make personal finance fun, right? Yeah. And so, it could be, a boring topic, a topic that, people don't like to tune into. But because I'm able to take hip hop and pop culture and infuse that within personal finance lessons, that's what the Ash Cash brand is. The Ash Cash brand, I'm what people call the hip hop financial motivator. Someone who is able to use hip hop as a tool to teach. And I've built the brand through strategic partnerships. Looking at a lot of people who are personal finance experts, when they, it's a little different now because there are a lot of personal finance experts. When I started, back in 2006, I believe was the first time I was really trying to kind of like build a brand and become a speaker and things of that nature. There weren't a lot of people, talking about personal finance. There were just, a few people. And so when I first started, it was like, how can I talk to everybody? But now that there's so many, different experts out there, it's important that, you niche down, you find, your voice, you find who you are, who do you talk to, who do you resonate with, the urban professional, right? I resonate with the 40-year-old who grew up on hip hop, right? Hip hop is 20, 30 years old, right? And so that 40-year-old who kind of, grew up through hip hop, but now is a parent, now is a homeowner, now, has a business. They still talk a certain language, and they need, someone who could talk their language as well. And that's how I built the brand, by partnering up with other brands that may not talk about personal finance. And so, whether it's the allhiphop.com, right? Allhiphop.com, salute to them. They took me on, early, around 2010, 2011. I had my own column on allhiphop.com called Ask Ash Cash, where I was giving out, financial lessons to the hip hop community. Another big shout out to Don Diva magazine, who, gave me a column as well. And I would, give personal finance advice to people in the streets and even people who were in jail and incarcerated because, people who were incarcerated, subscribe to the magazine a lot. And so, that's how, I built the brand by connecting myself with, other brands that had built-in audiences that I could add value to. And I just, continue to do that. And so now, I'm at a space where I'm called upon, certain media outlets, whenever they need a source, they'll reach out to me. If they need someone to be on television and talk about, certain financial principles, they call to me, and that's how I have built the brand. And my trajectory for the brand is to be that voice, right? I have my own radio station, my own radio show in New York, every Friday at 7 p.m. WHCR, 90.3 FM. And it's called the Ash Cash Show. And so I'm a radio personality as well. And I talk to people about, their finances, but also, the aspiration or the next iteration of the Ash Cash brand is television. And it's getting, my own television show to also continue to kind of spread that word of fiscal responsibility.
Yeah. It sounds like you're hustling, man.
Oh,
it
absolutely.
sounds like
never stop. Never stop. Yeah.
And I think what's really cool is you're hopping into like any opportunity or most opportunities that you can get, and that allows you to take on a different audience, reach different people, and I think that's huge. I think that's really important as an entrepreneur. It's kind of like Grant Cardone says. He says, like, you have to say yes to opportunities.
Oh, absolutely.
And
not to cut you off, the great thing about it too is that if you need to hustle with a purpose, right? If you are, my hustle to be seen is not about likes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's introducing the work to people so that they can continue to purchase books, right? And so if, something is new to you the first time you're introduced to it. And so, prime example, I said earlier, my first book I wrote in 2009, 2018, that book is still selling because when people are like, yo, who is this Ash Cash guy? I never heard of him before. And so they start to Google you. They start to look at all you've done. And they're like, oh, Mind Right, Money Right, 10 Laws of Financial Freedom. I want that book. And so they purchase the book, and it's still relevant information. And so, like you said, man, it's really, it's a hustle, but you have to hustle with a purpose. The purpose of the hustle is to, be able to ultimately continue to, build your network, create a wider network, a wider visibility. But ultimately it's for the bottom line to continue to, increase your income and your value in the space.
Yeah. I think that how I found you is probably how a lot of people, I mean, I'm not sure if you notice the numbers difference. It's the recent 444 book.
Yep.
And what shocked me is that like you hopped on it. Like the album was out for maybe like a month, 2 months, and you already had a book out. So like I think that kind of is indicative of your hustle throughout your life. Like you probably don't wait on an opportunity, you just kind of act on it. So that's huge. But I want to talk to you about what the book is about. And any like principles that you can share with us, any ideas that really triggered that book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been a Jay-Z fan since I was a teenager. And so when I heard the 444 album, immediately I was like, whoa, right? Like, Jay-Z has always given financial principles within his lyrics. He's always done it. But he sort of like, weaved it in, right? Because like he said, truthfully, I want to rhyme like common sense, but I did 5 mil. I haven't been rhyming like common sense. And what he's saying is that he would love to be a conscious rapper, but at the end of the day, I sold 5 million records. I got to give the people what they want, right?
Yeah.
And so what he has done, though, throughout his career, was he's weaved in a lot of great financial principles, business principles, life principles within his lyrics. 444, though, was the first time like he was intentional about it. He was so intentional that a lot of people kind of focused on like Beyonce and his mother being gay and all that stuff. But that was like 20% of the album, if that. 80 to 90% of the album was about financial empowerment, was about credit, was about building your business, was about generational wealth, was about, you know, not taking, you know, advances, taking chances over advances. And so what I felt, and one of the reasons why I decided to kind of jump on it was, you know, I felt like Jay-Z, who is so influential, was giving us the what needs to happen, right? This is what needs to happen in order for us to, you know,
hold on one second before you said chances over advances. And I feel like that's a double entendre. I think that maybe he's talking about Chance the Rapper, but he's also talking about taking the risk and kind of like I say, choosing yourself. Did you point that out in the book too?
Yeah. So I have a chapter on the book that talks about taking chances over advances, right? And in the book, you know, it's specifically the chapter on entrepreneurship, right? Because, you know, at the end, so he says it, right? Like, you guys still taking advances, huh? Right? You know, and so he's sort of saying that in this day and age, why are artists specifically taking advances from record labels when they could just take a chance on themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, for me, whether you're in the music business, whether you are an entrepreneur, whatever it is, you have to take a chance on yourself over an advance. An advance could be a paycheck from your job. An advance could be somebody, you know, buying your business. An advance could be, you know, someone taking equity from you, whatever it is. You have to take a chance on yourself. And so,
absolutely,
you know, that particular, you know, chapter just talks about how do you create a business? How do you say no to the advance, right? There's a, you know, I talk about the story where Master P says that when he, you know, first got into the music business, Interscope, I believe it was Interscope, but some record label had offered him $1 million, you know, to sign with them. And he turned it down. And at the time he turned it down, he only had $500 to his name. But he said, listen, I knew that if the record label was willing to give me $1 million, then I was worth way more than that. And he was able to make $40 million, you know, based on that decision. And so, that, you know, that chance over advance definitely was a double entendre, because if you look at Chance the Rapper, you know, that's exactly what he did, right? He was able to win a Grammy without even, you know, being independent, without even having, you know, to sign with a label. And so he has been, you know, the blueprint, you know, sort of speak. And so, it was definitely a double entendre, but definitely, you know, a message to artists that you don't have to, take advances. You could take a chance on yourself.
And I think that this is something that's truly a passion of mine. That's why I'm big on Big Baller Brand. That's why I'm big on Currency, the rapper that's an independent rapper. And one thing that I'll say is that if you take a chance on yourself, your path might look different than the person who does take an advance. But that doesn't mean that you can't still get to where they are. So it's like with Currency, he releases album after album of a free album. He's getting out like albums like once a month. Or with Big Baller Brand, they had to go overseas to manufacture what they're doing. They have to go to these different leagues. They can't go straight to the NBA, but when you go overseas, they have their logo in the middle of the court. They have their logo on the jerseys. Right. So it's like, I think that in a lot of ways, sometimes people get discouraged by the term entrepreneurship. And that's why I like the term choosing yourself. It's like you can sit around, you can wait for a label to pick you. You can wait for your job to pick you. You can wait for the boss to pick you. You can wait for the teacher to pick you. But like if you pick yourself, you could be working and it's just like you make so much more money, but you also open up opportunities for other people. So it's like for me, like if I wanted to hire one of my friends at my job that I work at a 9 to 5, they wouldn't pick him up, but I can pick him up and I can make him an executive at my business. And so like it's bigger than just us. And I think that that's a lot of reasons why the wealth gap exists, is because we are so focused on the jobs. We're so focused on somebody picking us, including us, saying that you're good enough instead of just saying, I am good enough. Watch what I do.
Absolutely.
So,
I agree 100%. I agree.
What else did you find inside of in the book that people will probably take some value from?
No, absolutely. And so, the way, I sort of crafted the book was really first focusing on yourself, right? And so, I talk about, credit, there's a chapter on credit and how you can use that as leverage for forfeiting the V12 engine, how to budget your money, paying yourself first, chances over advances, how to, create a business. We talk about the spiritual stuff really works, right? A lot of times people don't add value or give credit to spirituality as it relates to your finances and managing your money. And so I have a whole chapter on, spirituality. But then, it culminates talking about, right, what's better than one billionaire too. And so it talks about cooperative economics, right? And so as you mentioned earlier, if you have a business, you're able to now, hire your friend and allow them to grow in the business. But what if your friend has a business as well? You're able to now support that business. And as you guys support each other, you're sort of like rising the tides together. And so we talk about cooperative economics. And then, then lastly, I talk about generational wealth. That's the key, right? My parents didn't have, so the shift started with me, right? And so it talks about how you can use estates, trusts, and wills to protect your assets. Jay-Z talked about this in the book, or in the album, and I talk about this in the book. We talk about Prince, right? Prince died without a will. And so, when Jay-Z said, I sat down with Prince eye to eye, he told me his wishes before he died, right? Prince told Jay-Z his wishes, but because Prince didn't have a will, all of those wishes didn't matter, right? Everything, you think he wanted his masters with his masters, right? And so I talk about that story and how, having proper life insurance, having, estate planning, trust, wills could really, circumvent not having your wishes, granted, and allows you to, pass down wealth from generation to generation. And so, yeah, the book is just, a step-by-step guide on how to implement each financial principle that was given to us within the album. And so if someone who reads the book is really gonna be able to take away everything that they need in order to start their journey to financial freedom, everything that they need to be able to merrily eat off of streams. I talk about that too. I give them tips on how to create multiple streams of income. Yeah. And so, you start off with you as an individual, and then you start to add your talent as an individual to your community, and then you build generational wealth.
Nice. I feel like every album like that should have a book that goes along with it. Only because it's like if all the stuff that you're spelling out is probably stuff that he thought about as he was writing the bars, but it's like you can only put so much in a song.
Yes.
So it's like you kind of need somebody like you to expand what was there for people who they'll hear it, they'll dance to it, but then you're like, dang, like this stuff is real life, is actually applicable to our lives. And I think the coolest thing is it's applicable to our lives like now, here and now. He's taking what's going on right now, his life, our lives, and applying what we can. It's like a blueprint growing forward.
Absolutely.
So that's cool. Man, there's a ton of questions I could ask you, but I don't want to hold you too long. I'll end with the three questions that I ask everybody. And one question is, who is somebody that you look up to and why?
My biggest inspiration is Magic Johnson. A lot of people don't realize that Magic Johnson is a trailblazer. Prior to him coming into the NBA, athletes didn't own the rights to their name, right? The NBA owned the rights to their name. And so when Magic came into the league, he didn't think it was right that, the NBA could sell a jersey that says Magic Johnson and he gets nothing out of it. And so part of his negotiation was for him to own the right to his name, so that if he sold a jersey, he would get money from it. And fast forward, years later, a lot of, that's a norm, right? And you mentioned Big Baller Brand earlier. That's why I'm a big supporter of Big Baller Brand, because people are so used to giving Nike and Reebok all of these licensing deals or allowing them to license their name, opposed to getting into a real partnership with them. And so Big Baller Brand is breaking that mold. And whether it's them or, you know, somebody 5 years down the line, you know, that business model is going to shift. And so, you know, I've been a big fan of Magic Johnson because I watch how he's able to, even now today, be so powerful in business, but he's really inconspicuous though, right? Like he, you know, he's on television, he's smiling, he has the big smile on his face, but he, you know, has hundreds of Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
He owns tons of properties and movie theaters, and he is, has part ownership in a baseball team, and he's just doing such phenomenal things from a business front. But still still able to kind of give back to the community, still able to be sort of like down to earth, like not this, big mogul that you can't touch. And so that's why he's my inspiration. He's somebody I look up to because as I continue to, build my empire and create, wealth, I want to be the same way, right? I want to be someone who has tremendous wealth, has, a lot of businesses and really, to give back to my community. I also want to be, touchable. I want people to be able to see me and feel like, yeah, I can relate to Ash, and he's, down to earth brother. And so, yeah, that's somebody who is top of my list of,
nice.
Business inspiration.
Yeah. I guess 2 points on Magic Johnson is the first is that him and I think one of his companies just bought the fairgrounds in Detroit. So they're supposed to be turning that into like a shopping center area or something that's going to advance the community. That's one point. I think that one of the reasons why I look up to Magic Johnson is he showed that it's possible to make money where you live. He showed that it's possible to make money in the inner city. And so many people think that there's no wealth there. People think there's no value. They think that it's just a lost cause. And we're sitting on a gold mine. We're sitting on not only a gold mine, we also have a competitive advantage in that gold mine, meaning that a lot of people, they can't get in there if they wanted to. So it's like it's sitting there, $1.2 trillion worth of buying power. All we have to do is create opportunities for people to spend with us and consume with us and start recycling that dollar. So I think that's one of the things that Magic did improve that was possible. And one thing that was really cool about Magic is like he knew his customer better than the big brands. So Absolutely. He was able to cater products, cater movies, cater snacks to them. Even like if you go to his Starbucks, I went to the one in Compton off Crenshaw once, and it's not like any other Starbucks. Like you have people in there just chilling, playing chess, like people playing music, doing poetry. It's like you bring what exists and you cater it more towards people. They have a more enjoyable time. I think there's so much opportunity. Like you get to enhance your community, but you also get wealthy at the same time. Like it's Absolutely. A win-win.
Absolutely.
So the second question of the last three, I need to think of a cool term for that. But the second question is, what's your favorite book?
Man, favorite book is Think and Grow Rich. It is the book that has changed my life. It is the book that allowed me to change the trajectory of my life. And so it introduced me to understanding the power of my thoughts, the power of my words. And it is what has given me the ability to be successful because a lot of what Napoleon Hill spoke about in Think and Grow Rich are concepts that you don't normally find in personal finance books. And so, the mastermind principle is something that I practice to this day. And so that is my favorite book of all time. I read it, on a consistent basis. I do have a close second and third, honorable mention, I guess. And that would be Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Nice. And so those two have like really, between Think and Grow Rich, Four Agreements, and The Alchemist, those are books that I have read, probably once or once or twice every year.
Wow. That's cool. It's back-to-back shows somebody mentioned Four Agreements, so that's pretty cool.
Now that will change your life. Like that book right there will really give you perspective on how to, live life in the best way that you could possibly live it. I love that book.
This is like question 3A, or 2A rather. What is a book that maybe we've never heard of that you read that was helpful to you?
Man, a book that never heard of that was helpful to me.
Or just not very commonly recommended.
Yep. Man, there's a book, and I'm really big on like spirituality, law of attraction. And so I don't know if people know who Florence Shin is, but she has a book called The Game of Life. And it is, I mean, it's an old book. It's like maybe 1929. And if you actually Google it, you could probably download the PDF version or the audio version. Like, it's public domain right now. But yeah, The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shin. Her name is Florence Scovel Shin. And it really just teaches you about how to, attract the life that you want. Because I'm a living testament of that. I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of hard work that goes into it, goes into crafting or creating your life. But it starts with your thoughts. It starts with your thought process. It starts with your vision. It starts with the words that you say. And then it morphs into that reality after you put in the work. And so, yeah, that would be a book that, a lot of people may not know about, but it's a powerful book.
Cool. The last question is, what does wealth mean to you?
Man, wealth means having my money work for me. Wealth means that my children are able to, start life, on the right foot, doing what they want to do, and not what they have to do, right? Because, I was first generation. I say I'm first generation rich, where I had to kind of work hard and make money. But wealth to me is passing down businesses, assets, to my children, so that they can live the life that they want to live. And then, as they start to build families, they can have their kids live the life that they want to live. Wealth is about, breaking the cycle of poverty. Understanding that abundance is our birthright. And the only way that we can have that abundance is by creating wealth.
Yeah. Creating. Emphasis on creating. Yeah. Where can people find out more about you, your products, things that you have coming up?
Yes. You can visit me on my website, IamAshCash.com. Everything is there, books, events, blogs, videos, everything. And so you can follow me on Instagram, IamAshCash, Facebook, IamAshCash, Twitter, IamAshCash. I'm also Googleable as well, right? And so if you Google Ash Exantis, all of my stuff comes up. Or if you Google Ash Cash, all of my stuff comes up as well. So
how do you
reach out?
How do you spell your last name?
Exantis, EXANTUS.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So I thank you for coming on the show. I know people are going to get a ton of value out of this. You covered everything. You covered personal finance. You covered real estate investing. You covered building your brand, entrepreneurship. We hit all the fundamental principles of this show. So I appreciate you. If you guys are interested in joining any of our investment clubs, you know where to find us. We're at CapitalTodd.com. You can email us at info@CapitalTodd.com. We're doing great stuff, leveling up, working together, and just using the power of teamwork. Because as I say, business and investing are team sports. My name is Charles Oglesby. This is episode number 62, signing off. Very cool, man. I appreciate that.
You, brother. No, thank you so much, man. Had a dope time. Definitely, let me know when it goes up. I'll help promote it as well, man.
Yeah. It's a few weeks out, so maybe like 2 weeks.
Okay.
But I'll just shoot you an email. I'll tag you on social media, all that good stuff. So you'll see it for sure.
Okay, dope.
All right, man. I appreciate you.
All right, my brother. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Yep.
All right. Peace.